So from there then we need to think about some alternative and more practical and useful explanations for what's actually going on in zhan. And we can say first of all that there's a lot to the idea that visualization affects in some way physical performance. And there's studies done on this, and we know, for example, that in some cases it can increase strength, but it doesn't increase muscle mass, like visualization on its own without standing. It's one of the things that Yao Zhongzhong talks about. So it's his kind of explanation that he talks about like thickening the fibers in the muscles, things like that. Well, there's some studies been done just using visualization that have shown that they can increase strength, and it doesn't. I mean, the research has got to be it's got to be conducted by multiple different studies to be considered fully valid. But as a kind of initial study, the researchers say it didn't create more muscle mass. What it did was it improved muscle efficiency. So people who use visualizations, for example, of doing bicep curls and things like that, were able to improve muscle efficiency, tested based on just what they could lift. I mean, there's problems with the research method, I know, but it just begins to suggest, and it's something that's been used widely, I think, now in sports science, the idea of visualizing optimal movement and that kind of thing. So we know that there's this really useful thing that visualization can do in the body. But we also know that it needs to be something else as well. So this begins to tell us something else important about standing, that it's not just about visualization, and also it's not just about some kind of, I don't know what to call it, but certain people within, let's say, I don't want to call it Yiquan, but within the Yiquan community, who've kind of taken away the standing a lot. To me, it's just to commercialise it more, and say you don't really need to do that. It's something more to do with visualisation and feelings and this kind of marrow washing. You're going to develop some kind of spiritual force. You're just going to go like that, and you're going to pin people away. And if it was just that, why would you need to do standing at all? Why would you need to put your muscles under any kind of strain or stress or experience any kind of physical feelings like that? Just use visualization. Why would you even need to do that? If you need to do that, then obviously this is either a magical shape that attracts chi or something like that, or this does something physical that we need, that feeds into and helps and aids our actual practical fight training. And Wang Xiangzhai himself talks about Japanese people very often, well, he's read about this, that Japanese people very often will stop for a while before they perform a task, and they'll have a moment of quiet and visualise the task that they're going to do. And he says they're kind of halfway there, but it's one-sided, because you need to put the body under some kind of, you need to create this physical, I don't want to say strain, but you need to put it under some kind of work. It's got to be doing some kind of work to create this effect that we need. It can't just be visualization. Okay, so let's think a little bit about standing and visualization and begin to try and put some concrete ideas around some of the things that we're trying to do. And the first thing I want to get across is the idea that we're trying to deform ourselves. I think this is really contradictory. It's a wonderfully contradictory idea, because people always talk in these amazing terms about each one freeing you, and let's think about it in a complete, like I always do, try and get people to think about it in a completely different way. We want each one to deform you, to deform, to take away the shape that you've been given, and that shape, and recognizing that shape is in your mind. We want to take away that shape, and we want to give you another shape. It's going to be a complex shape. It's going to be a shape that can move, but nevertheless, it's going to be a shape. I want us to assume the posture, this basic standing posture. It's sometimes called health posture, but that's not really the thing. What differentiates a health posture from a martial arts posture is pretty much the visualization, not the posture itself. So it's a little bit of a misnomer. But assume this basic posture. So here's where it gets a little bit confusing, because the relationship between minimal muscle use and intent, it's a very fine line. It's not one or the other. We traditionally talk about it as like coming entirely from intent. And in that sense, that intent holds your arms up and intent fires the muscles, then yes. But it does not just imaginary. Your arms are actually in front of you and they are actually out, and that is actually involving muscles. We did this exercise in the previous videos where we were imagining pushing out like that. We want to imagine that again. We're pushing out, and then imagine that there's two kind of bamboo poles here and you're pushing against them. You want to kind of intensify the feeling, but you've got to keep checking, am I using muscles or am I using my intent? Obviously you're always using your muscles, but am I tensing? So some of the things that Wang Xiangzhai talks about, like using clumsy strength and trying to force the movement and stuff like that, what he's talking about is like, don't tense. Don't tense the muscle and push out like that. That's clumsy strength. Relax, 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 relax. This is also problematic because, again, this is another way that the training stage gets falsely attributed to the practical fight stage by people who don't make that, who never make that transition. Again, that's a really famous school of Yiquan. I don't think it's massive, but it's quite famous, who misinterpret this idea that when you're doing this kind of training, that you don't use this like physical force, that you try and use intention, that somehow is what you do when you're having a fight, that you don't actually smack someone right in the face. You're just going to use some kind of non-physical mental induction, and it's going to, I can assure you they're going to smack you in the face and only use real physical force. And the only reason that those people don't really know that is that they never put the gloves on and do any sparring. So again, it's this failure to bring it across into the reality of the fight. Imagining the two bamboo poles there, and again here you can imagine two here as well as you pushing out with your thighs. Remember I said, like, particularly in the legs, because there's such big muscle groups that you really feel the muscles getting involved, and that kind of makes you want to use the muscles even more. So you just got to keep checking, just relax. And also something we want here is a feeling that only comes after a certain amount of time. And it's that feeling that there is someone there. Is there anyone there? It's that feeling that there is something there. And it's a very specific kind of feeling where the body locks into it's like you've locked into a posture like that. And this is where we talk about things like micro movement, where you can then start playing like, and it feels like there's something there, and you're going like that, and it really feels like it, and you relax even more, and you get the feeling even more strongly, and you can rock with it. And Yao Zhong talks about, like, just playing with the micro movement, and then when you get the micro movement, just try to make it smaller and smaller and smaller, so people can't even see it, but you'll feel it like your body locks into a particular position. That's our key. That's our key for what we want to do with this. One of the key things that we want to do with this training exercise. So we feel like we're pushing out. We hold it and we relax and we relax and relax. And when you've built up a little bit of endurance, like, actually the best way to do this is just to completely relax first. Don't even try. As a beginner stage, you can, use more muscle and imagine and visualize and then pulling and pushing a little bit. But when we built up our endurance, we want to try and completely relax. And it's through completely relaxing that we get this feeling that the muscles are locked. I suppose it's a kind of physical illusion because we're using such a minimal amount of muscle use to, say, pull in or push out, that it makes the arms feel like they weigh 100 times more than they really do. And that's the feeling, like, that's actually creating that sensation that there's something there, that it's kind of locked. And you get that by completely relaxing, for the simple reason that we're trying to get it down to the absolute minimal nerve firing to just get the sensation that we're just triggering whatever it is that causes this movement in the muscles. We're just triggering that. We're triggering it, but we're not doing it enough to actually move. Because it's so minimal, we feel like it's like your muscles have been reduced to 1/100th of the size, so all of a sudden your arm feels like so heavy, that you're kind of dragging it in, but at the same time it doesn't feel heavy. It's just like that feeling that you're dragging it and it's kind of locked in that position. This is closely related to two things. One, this thing that we talked about right at the start, the idea that there's the apples under your arms and this rounded structure, and two, to the idea of the lock point. And this is what I mean by this is deforming your body. This is, when I say deforming your body, you've got to see this on like a much more advanced conceptual level, that society itself gave you a particular body, and it's your perception of your body and how your body functions. You can think of it almost like it's like a separate body. It's the body you think you have. It's the body that you imagine you have. The body that you imagine how it functions. And now we're getting into something really sophisticated about virtual reality. Han Sihuang talks about this very sophisticated relationship between what's real and what's not real. The body that you think is real, yeah, it's physically real, but the way it moves and the way it functions, that's socially constructed. That's not actually your real physical body. It's like a social body, like a program that's been downloaded into you that makes your body function and work physically in a certain way. And we're writing a different program. We're creating a different program. We're deforming that. We're deforming it and reforming it into something different. And we're reforming it into this rounded, insect-like, it's Kafka-esque, a new body. This is your Yiquan body. We're reforming it into that. And that's a really sophisticated idea, and we call this truncation, to make something smaller, because it's a very particular kind of body function. And I don't know if this is true, but I've read anyway, like sometimes you see photographs of people when they're doing Xing Yiquan and they hold the sleeve over their arms to create this effect that you can't fully stretch out your arms like that. And it's intended to teach the body this feeling of truncation. Whether that's true or not, it will certainly be a good way of doing it. Like you hold your sleeve like that and it can't straighten out. So you throw a punch and it can't straighten out. That's one of the things that we're trying to do. We're trying to create this process of deformation and reformation into your Yiquan body. This Yiquan body isn't real. It's a virtual reality body. It's like a program. It's like a template that you're going to experience through your whole body. And for this to happen, the intent has to flood and take control of the whole body. Because one of the key things about this template as it manifests itself into your physical form is that you feel it. You feel it in a way that you don't normally feel your social body. The way that you feel your social body is highly regulated. So think about feelings like, intimacy or people touching you and things like that, or pain, stress, discomfort, the way you sit in your office chair, or the way you drive your van, or the way you sweeping a brush, or the way you're working in a factory, all affecting different parts of your body in different ways. All of this is socially constructed, how you feel your body. We're doing something totally different. We're creating a body where we feel everywhere, everything comes alive with intent, and it's more than coming alive with intent. It's like the screwing force, the twisting, the interconnection of the limbs, the whole body, and this very sensuous, sinewy feeling of moving, and the idea that there's apples under the arms, and there's apples in different parts of the body, creating this rounded structure. It's a virtual reality body. It's mind-blowing. It's a mind-blowing concept. And we're trying to develop this. We're trying to develop this feeling, and it's a feeling of curtailment, that it's not stretched out like that, it's rounded and it's curtailed. And the reason we want that is for the second thing that this links into, and that's the lock point. When we throw a punch, and look how it all structurally integrates together, that when we throw a technique in each one, it's almost always curtailed. So this principle of the unity of square and circle, square force and circular force, this straight but not straight punch, it's straight but it's not straight. It's part of I talked about the way that the different structural synergy works, that You know, you throw a straight but not straight punch, the elbow can hit, you know, the hand hits back this way, and all the things that I talked about in the first video. But also at the same time, this linking into, for this very reason, links into this truncation of movement, that when we throw the punch doesn't go straight out like that. And unless we absolutely have to, and we can break the rule anytime we want, unless we absolutely have to make the reach. But for the most part, just keeping this truncated movement all the time to help our structural symmetry work all the time like this. And this interlinks with multiple traditional wushu concepts. I think the most important here is one I've already talked about before, and that's the idea of storing force. That when you get your Yiquan body, the body is storing force, and Wang Xiangzhai really talks about this idea of all these different, like triangular force, different triangles, oblique triangles made by different parts of the body, by creating this round, alive thing. Something hits you and you can release force any direction. Hit with any part of the body, springy, defensive. It's not making you a super person, it's not making you a super being. You still got to do all your fight training and stuff like that. But you see the idea. And it's all stored force because it's all this unity of square and circular. At any moment it can just expand into any posture you want, or any different direction. Legs, arms, head, you know, shoulders, elbows, everything's just storing force like in this new deformed and reformed physical form. So when we throw a punch, it's curtailed, it's truncated punch. Like this, it's this form that we would try to develop in that original exercise that I talked about, where we imagine being lifted up and we maintain this form. Like we're being pulled out of the new mould. Here's our new Yiquan body, that it has all of these features, and this is its shape. It's like a gestalt shape, that it's this shape, but when you look at it from a different angle, it's this shape. And when you look at it from a different angle, again, it's this shape. You know, and a different angle again, it's this shape. And a different angle again, it's this shape. And then you look back at it originally again, it's just back to this shape. So I would call this the Han Yuan posture. It's this basic mould, the gestalt mould. So it's got all the features that we then want to bring into all our other postures. And we can break the rules at any time. That's partly what freedom is, you know, with this. Because one of the things this process does when you go through it is it massively increases your ability to use your body in other ways. So it helps with other sports and things like that. But this is our Yiquan body. All those things that we've already talked about, structural movement, all feed into this. They're all usable by this. They all need this new insect. I think I always feel like it's very close to mantis kind of, and I move very much like a mantis when I'm sparring like that. Your Yiquan body. Think about that concept, you know, it's just mind blowing. So the next thing we need is to think about is like this truncated movement when we punch, and the feeling isn't quite the same as when we're in standing, but it's very, very close, and it's being trained by this, like the ability to hit and stop like this, and remember this key idea of the correct configuration of relaxation and tension within the whole structure. It's one of the things that we're training within standing, and just like we talked about the idea of this kind of virtual reality sensor line, so the E is calculating and working with this configuration movement, this correct feeling of relaxation and tension. So that when we throw a punch, it's there. It's a very, very similar feeling. It has some different things brought into it, obviously, because when we're doing standing, we're not doing Fa Li in that sense. Although Wang Xiangzhai says Fa Li, Shi Li, and Zhan zhuang, they're all the same thing, just at different speeds. So you can kind of think about it like that. But it's not that simple, because when you do Fa Li, there are different, for example, shearing forces on the body and things like that. But the movement quality that we want is very close to this. It's very close to this standing feeling. And that level of relaxation and That's how we build it up into the ability to do Farley with the movements. And then, yeah, okay, there's all the controlling, the shearing forces and the muscles and the structure and the impacts, shock and all that. But at the heart of it is this same feeling. At the heart of it is this, that we've been developing. This structural movement. And at the same time, this is overdetermined because this helps to truncate our movement. It helps to start making us think this is our natural comfortable shape when we're doing like this. And think about this idea of becoming comfortable with zhan and practicing it over longer periods and retraining the body to feel comfortable in this. We want it to retrain so much that it becomes our natural movement, that becomes like, that's what we immediately, drop us on the floor and we'll immediately spring into this kind of movement. It becomes our natural movement. And this is what, I mean, think about what wushu is, and the idea of a world of wushu, a kind of Jianghu kind of world, that it creates an alternative society within society. It creates an alternative structure, you know, that from top to bottom, and I talked about this in one of the earlier videos, that we're creating an entire alternative. This is all part of a process of creating an entire alternative body, an entire alternative way of movement. I mean, maybe you have to sit with that idea for a bit. I'm not sure of, because I've talked so much, like, but it's really, really important. They're really, really important concepts to get across. So this then leads on to some quite interesting things. So we can go back to this idea, for example, that the point of zhan is to use kind of mental induction to make your cells be in a state of relaxation and tension. That can only really happen with certain muscle cells, so it can't be right, because the feeling that we want is all over the body. It can be part of maybe it's part of the answer, maybe that does happen at a cellular level, and maybe that accounts for some of the feelings that we get when we're doing zhan. So I'm not dismissing it at all, but I want people to think about it instead as there are degrees, like the layers of an onion. So one of the things that Yao Zhongzhong particularly emphasises is the idea of different big parts of the body being interlinked by joints, and that being affected by the way we do stand. And I keep doing a different zhuang, I recognise. And he talks about these major parts of the body being interlinked, and the mind first of all interlinking with the joints, because that's where we habitually use our mind to operate our body. So that's the easiest thing to start getting the sense of tension and relaxation, and finding that doctrine of the mean between relaxation and the tension. Obviously, I mean, the idea of creating through visualization, like a perfect combination of tension and relaxation, and maybe, you know, people talk about it pulsing or something like that. I mean, for one thing, that would be scientifically testable. But for another thing, like, that's then linked into this idea that this is Han Yuan Li, and I don't think that's true. We'll talk about that more in a bit. But the most important thing is that the people who talk about that can't do anything particularly special. It's not like they've got any kind of magic power. They're not hitting the bag harder than a boxer, a Western boxer. You know, there's no. It's talked about as if like there's some kind of, what they say, mind force or something like that. Like there's something there that's very potent in terms of physical ability, and there's absolutely zero evidence that that's true. So again, it's all kept in this realm of theory and training, and it never transfers over into this. So that's where we get all these excuses, like, you know, say, oh, you know, go to China and have a fight if you don't believe it. So, well, hold on, it's you that's saying it about, you're saying you're the expert in it, but if I want to see you do it, you know, for one thing, I've got to have a fight with someone just because you claim you can do something that sounds unbelievable. And for two, you're not even going to have the fight. You're going to send me to China. You're going to pimp the fight out to China. Come on. So even if it's true, it doesn't really make any difference, because it doesn't have any practical reality outcome that anyone can show. Whereas this does. This idea of thinking about it, first of all, in terms of the joints. It's not just about that, as we'll see in a moment. Thinking about it, first of all, in terms of the joints. And using visualization to integrate With the gremlin look, to integrate the intention. I don't want to talk too much about that because I've already talked so much. To integrate the joints together into this. Well, you can see how if you can get the right level of relaxation and tension in every joint, then that creates a whole body integration of relaxation and tension. So that in itself is more straightforward, more scientific, more obvious, and more immediately testable than the idea of cells pulsing or something like that and using the intention to affect cells on a micro level. The other thing worth talking about here briefly is the idea of qi. So some people say, it's bringing qi into the body. This is quite an interesting idea. So lots of people saying, well, Wang Xiangzhai abandoned the idea of qi. Yao Zongzong doesn't use the idea of qi. Neither of these things are really true. So, Wang Xiangzhai was using the idea of qi, certainly using the character for qi, well into his 70s, in his early 70s. And Yao Zongzong also used the idea of qi, so did Wang Demo, and so did really most of Wang Xiangzhai's students still use this idea of qi. Wang Xiangzhai is a more sophisticated thinker than that. He generally doesn't abandon ideas, he generally reinterprets them in different ways. So it's not about did Wang Xiangzhai abandon the idea of qi, it's like what did he mean? And what did Yao Zongzong mean? So they'll usually talk about two things, smoothing the blood and smoothing the qi. What do they mean by that? Smoothing the blood, they mean the thing everyone feels when you have high or low blood pressure, that you can feel, either you feel your pulse in your temples, and that's obviously very important when you put under stress, like when you're going to have a fight. And smoothing the blood, it's just a way of speaking. What do they mean by smoothing the qi? Qi means literally gas, but also like kind of air. But it's obvious that in specific kind of martial arts or Chinese medicine terms that it has like a specific kind of meaning. It doesn't mean energy. There's no evidence of any kind of energy concept being linked to qi anywhere ever in Chinese medicine. That's very much a misnomer and a mistranslation. It certainly doesn't translate to anything like energy. Gas doesn't translate to energy. As an idiom, as a martial arts and Chinese medical culture idiom, it obviously has a very specific meaning when they talk about the idea of smoothing the qi. And the way that they talk about it, it's also obvious that they think everyone else will understand what they mean by that, and also that complete beginners will understand exactly what they mean by that, or with very little instruction they'll understand. So it seems to be that, Yao Zongzong also uses this idea, so it's by no means that they abandoned this idea of qi, they just kind of restructured it and use it occasionally. And it appears like they mean something much more like the idea of breathing, and then just using breathing to try and control agitation in the body, like when they say smooth the qi. So controlling the pulse by thinking about your blood pressure, it makes my blood pressure boil. I'm controlling, like thinking about breathing naturally, breathing deeply. And just the kind of thing that everyone does, I suppose, in any kind of meditation, where you just kind of use breathing and the sense of breathing and the sense of the flow of breathing to just kind of aid the loss of agitation, whatever the word is, to dissipate agitation, smooth the qi. Seems from concepts that they mean it like that. So just because they use the idea of qi doesn't mean that they buy into everything else, like, qi meridians and stuff like that, and qigong and things, and all the stuff around qigong and traditional Chinese medicine. Zhao Daoxing definitely rejects the idea of qi, but other people, others of Wang Xiangzhai students don't. They go even further into the idea of qi. Wang Demo certainly talks about qi, and several of the others as well. And we can think about it like that. And I'll talk about another time about how people in the past, the ancient past of Wushu, thought about breath and its relationship to qi. And I'll talk about qi and the idea of qi as a kind of virtual reality concept, and how sophisticated actually that is. When people say, do I believe in qi? It's like yes and no. It's each one, it's very contradictory. Yes and no, it's more sophisticated than what you think, It's not just some pseudo-scientific concept, it's much more sophisticated than that. So when you've smoothed your blood flow, and you've smoothed your qi, and you've remembered that it's nearly time for the dog's supper, which he will certainly let you know, Because talk about a socially constructed body. You certainly socially constructed your body around time, don't you? I bet it's exactly 9 o'clock when I check at this point. And just 5 minutes, love, and then we'll definitely get you supper. Get you supper, never mind all that stuff, get me my supper. I want to introduce this idea. No, I don't. I'll talk about it another time. Han Yuan Li, I've talked too much. I'll talk about Qi and Han Yuan Li. I'll talk about all those next. Maybe I'll do it next. That's it. That's a lot of talk. But remember when I talked about the idea that you need theory, and unfortunately we also need theory that kind of talks to what other people have said and trying to understand the Yiquan scene and where it's gone and why people give the explanations that they do and linking them into how we can come up with better and further explanations. We've only gone still only gone a very small way into understanding standing, and I know that I haven't given any exercises. Hopefully do that in the next video. Those conceptualizations, that theory, is a vital part of learning Yiquan and understanding, expanding our understanding of how it functions. It helps get twice the results for half the effort. That's what Wang Xiangzhai says. Okay, that's it for today then. So again, thanks very much for watching. One love, and I'll see you in the next one.